She woke up before sunrise, as she did every day. The small room she called home was dimly lit by the early morning light sneaking through the cracks in the worn wooden shutters. The walls were thin, the paint peeling off in places, and the floorboards creaked under every step. Outside, the streets were quiet, but she could already hear the distant sounds of life waking up in the neighborhood. Her day would be long, but she had no choice. She had responsibilities, and even though her resources were limited, she carried herself with determination. Her mornings always started with simple chores. She swept the floor, tidied the small kitchen corner, and boiled water for tea. There wasn't much to eat, just a small loaf of bread or a few vegetables. But she had learned to make do with whatever was available. Despite having very little, she never let herself complain. Life had taught her to be strong, to survive, and more importantly, to find small joys in the little things around her. She often found solace in the morning birdsong or the gentle sunlight that touched her worn-out table. After breakfast, she prepared to leave for work. Her work was not glamorous or well-paying, but it was honest. She delivered small parcels and groceries for a nearby shop and sometimes helped neighbors with cleaning or small errands. Every day was exhausting, yet she never let it dampen her spirit. She believed in the value of hard work and knew that every small effort counted. Even when her body ached and her hands were sore, she reminded herself that giving up was never an option. The streets she walked on were narrow and crowded, lined with houses and small shops. She knew almost everyone in the neighborhood and they knew her. People recognized her for her kindness and willingness to help despite having so little. Children waved at her as she passed, and neighbors often called out greetings. She always smiled and replied warmly, making an effort to make everyone feel acknowledged. It wasn't much, but to her, these small gestures mattered more than anything. Her life had never been easy. She had grown up in a family that struggled financially, learning from a young age how to make the most of every small resource. There were times when food was scarce and the nights were cold, but she never let these hardships make her bitter. Instead, she cultivated compassion. She understood pain, and it had taught her to be empathetic. Even when she felt tired or hungry, she would always notice if someone else needed help. She believed that life was not just about surviving, but about caring for others, no matter how little you had. One particular morning felt colder than usual. The sky was overcast, and the wind carried a chill that seeped into her thin clothes. She wrapped her worn-out shawl tighter around her shoulders and continued walking. Her path took her past the local market where vendors were setting up their stalls. The smell of fresh vegetables, baked goods, and spices filled the air. She smiled at the familiar faces, exchanging a few kind words, and moved on as she walked. She thought about the small repairs she needed to make at home. A leaking faucet, a torn curtain, and a few broken tiles had been waiting for weeks. She didn't have the money to fix them, but she always tried to find creative solutions. She patched up the curtain with some old fabric, tightened the faucet herself, and used leftover pieces to cover the broken tiles. Life had made her resourceful, and she prided herself on being able to make things work. No matter how limited her resources were, reaching the shop where she worked, she greeted the owner, a kind middle-aged woman who had always treated her fairly. The shop was small, but it served the community well. Her work involved cleaning, arranging products, and sometimes delivering orders to customers. She took pride in her work, ensuring that every task was done with care. Even though the pay was minimal, she felt fulfilled knowing she was contributing to something meaningful. During the day, she encountered many people. Some were kind, some impatient, but she treated everyone with the same respect and warmth. She noticed small details that others overlooked. A child struggling with heavy bags, an elderly neighbor crossing the street, a stray animal shivering in the cold. She offered help whenever she could, even if it meant going out of her way. People admired her for her selflessness, though she never sought recognition. Her joy came from the act itself, not from the praise it might bring. By afternoon, dark clouds began gathering in the sky. The wind picked up, and the first drops of rain started falling. She hurried to finish her deliveries, aware that a storm might be approaching. Her steps were quick but careful, as the slippery streets demanded attention. The storm reminded her of the times she had faced challenges before, both small and large, and how she had always found a way to navigate through them. She believed that life was full of storms, but kindness and determination could guide one through even the darkest clouds. Returning home, she prepared a simple meal, eating quickly before the rain worsened. She looked out the window as the sky darkened further, the wind howling against the walls. She knew that tonight would be difficult, as the storm could bring flooding or damage, but she wasn't afraid. Fear was something she had learned to manage long ago. What mattered most to her was the well-being of those around her, and she often thought about how she could help even in small ways. After dinner, she sat by the window watching the rain fall in sheets. She thought about her life, the struggles, and the little moments of happiness she had experienced. Despite the hardships, she felt a sense of peace. Her heart was full of compassion, and she believed that every act of kindness, no matter how small, had a purpose. She often wondered if the world noticed such acts, or if they simply passed unnoticed. But she never let that question stop her from doing what she felt was right. As night fell, the storm grew stronger. The wind howled through the streets, and the rain battered the windows. She prepared herself for a long night, ensuring that her small home was secure. She double-checked her few belongings, making sure everything was safe from the rising water. The storm was fierce, but she remained calm. She knew that panicking would not help, and she had learned to face challenges with a steady heart. Little did she know. This storm would bring more than just rain and wind. It would bring an unexpected encounter that could change her life forever. As she settled in for the night, listening to the rhythmic sound of raindrops against the roof, she felt a quiet anticipation. Her instincts told her that something significant was about to happen, though she could not yet imagine what it would be. All she knew was that her heart, always open to kindness, was ready for whatever the night might bring. The storm hit harder than anyone expected. Thunder rumbled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the streets in jagged flashes. She sat by the window, watching the rain pour down in thick sheets, the wind rattling the shutters. Water pooled on the ground outside, running through the narrow streets like small rivers. She knew the storm could last for hours, maybe even through the night. Despite the fear that crept into many hearts during such moments, she remained calm. She had faced challenges before, and this was no different. The storm was fierce, but it was temporary, and she was determined to endure it. As she prepared a small pot of tea to warm herself, she heard a faint knocking at the door. It was almost lost among the sound of rain and wind, but it was persistent. Her heart skipped a beat, and she hesitated for a moment. At this hour, with the storm raging outside, who could it be? She wiped her hands on her worn cloth and approached the door, peering through the small window. There, soaked to the bone and shivering, was a stranger. His clothes clung to him, and his hair dripped water onto the doorstep. He looked exhausted, cold, and frightened. She didn't hesitate. She opened the door wider and gestured for him to come inside. He stepped in carefully, grateful, but still wary. She noticed the mud on his shoes and the dirt on his clothes. He carried nothing with him, only the weight of the storm pressing down. She grabbed a towel from the shelf and handed it to him, motioning for him to dry off. He did so silently, not speaking, but his eyes held gratitude. Her home was small, barely enough for one person comfortably, but she made room for him. Without a second thought, she guided him to a chair near the small fireplace and handed him the warm tea she had made. He accepted it with trembling hands, sipping slowly, as if savoring every drop. She offered him a small plate with bread and a few slices of vegetables. He looked at the food, hesitant at first, but hunger overcame his pride, and he began eating. She watched quietly, not wanting to intrude but wanting to make sure he was comfortable. There was something in his eyes that told her he had been through a lot, though she could not yet imagine what. While he ate, she asked gentle questions. Learning that he had been caught in the storm while traveling and had nowhere to go, he was polite and reserved, answering only when necessary, but there was a vulnerability about him that made her heart ache. She offered more blankets and tried to make the space warmer, moving chairs closer together and closing the shutters against the wind. Even in her limited home, she created comfort, showing that kindness does not need wealth to be real. Every small gesture she made seemed to reassure him that he was safe, even in the middle of the storm. Hours passed, and the storm raged on outside. Lightning lit up the room in brief flashes, and thunder shook the walls. Yet inside, there was a sense of calm. They did not speak much, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. He was exhausted and eventually drifted into a light sleep, curled up on the chair she had made ready for him. She watched him, her heart filled with compassion. She thought about how often she had been helped by strangers in the past, and how meaningful a single act of kindness could be. She hoped that she could offer the same comfort to someone in need. She herself tried to rest, but sleep was hard to come by. She kept listening to the storm, checking on the stranger now and then, making sure he was warm enough, making small adjustments to keep him comfortable. It was a long night, but she did not complain. Her mind wandered to thoughts of the people in her neighborhood, wondering how they were faring in the storm. She hoped that everyone was safe, and she silently promised herself that she would help anyone who needed her, just as she had been helped before. As the night wore on, the rain continued to fall in relentless sheets. At one point, the stranger stirred, waking briefly, and she offered him more tea. He accepted it quietly and gave her a faint smile, one that seemed to convey a mix of gratitude and relief. It was the kind of smile that told her words were not necessary to understand each other. She had offered shelter, warmth, and food, and in return, she received acknowledgement, trust, and a connection that transcended the boundaries of strangers. Hours felt like minutes as the night slowly passed. Eventually, the storm began to lose its fury, and the rain slowed to a steady drizzle. The wind calmed, and the thunder grew distant. She sighed with relief, knowing that the worst had passed. Yet she remained vigilant, checking on the stranger, ensuring that he had not suffered through the long night. When she saw him finally resting comfortably, she allowed herself a brief moment of relaxation, feeling a quiet satisfaction that she had helped someone in need. Even when she had almost nothing herself, she reflected on her own life, realizing that acts of kindness did not require grand gestures or wealth. Even in her humble home, she could provide comfort, warmth, and safety to someone who needed it. It was a powerful realization, one that strengthened her belief in the goodness of human connection. The storm outside had been fierce and unforgiving, but inside, kindness had created a small sanctuary. When morning finally approached, the sky lightened, revealing the aftermath of the storm. Streets were wet, leaves scattered across the paths, and puddles reflected the early sunlight. The stranger woke fully, now able to see the damage caused by the storm. He looked at her with gratitude, perhaps realizing the depth of her generosity. She offered him a simple breakfast, knowing that his journey would continue soon, and he needed strength to move forward. Before leaving, he thanked her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. She smiled, telling him that it was nothing, that everyone deserved help when in need. There was no dramatic promise, no hint of reward. She did not expect anything in return, for her kindness had always been given freely. The stranger left quietly, disappearing down the street, and she watched him go, hoping that he would find safety and comfort wherever he was headed. After he left, she went about her day, reflecting on the night's events. Her heart was full, knowing that even a small act of kindness could make a difference in someone's life. The storm had tested her, yet she had remained steadfast, offering help to a stranger without hesitation. It was a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, compassion could shine through, creating moments of connection that were unforgettable. She did not yet know how the stranger's life would continue, but she knew that she had played a part in making it better. Even if just for a single night, the memory of that stormy night stayed with her, a quiet reminder that giving, even when you have very little, was never wasted. She continued her daily routines with renewed determination, carrying the warmth of her actions in her heart. She believed that life would always have storms, but as long as people like her continued to act with empathy and courage, those storms could be weathered with hope, resilience, and the quiet power of human kindness. The morning after the storm dawned quiet and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. She woke to the soft light filtering through the small gaps in her shutters. The sound of dripping water from the eaves and the faint chirping of birds reminded her that the world continued despite the storm. She stretched her tired body, feeling the soreness from the long day and night before. She looked around her small home, taking in the simple surroundings that had sheltered her and the stranger during the storm. The stranger was no longer there. She glanced at the chair where he had slept, noting the empty space, the slightly damp towel, and the warm cup that had been left behind. He had left quietly as he had come, without any fuss or fanfare. She felt a mix of emotions: relief that he was gone safely, curiosity about his life, and a small, quiet sadness that she might never see him again. Despite having almost nothing herself, she had given him comfort and warmth, and she hoped he would carry that memory with him. She went about her morning routine, sweeping the floor, washing a few dishes, and preparing a simple breakfast for herself. As she worked, her mind wandered to thoughts of the stranger. She wondered where he would go, if he had family, if he would be okay in the days to come. She hoped that her small act of kindness had made a difference for him, even if just for a night. It was a strange feeling, knowing that one person's life could intersect with hers in such a brief but meaningful way. She dressed in her worn clothes and prepared to step outside, ready to continue her day as usual. The streets were wet and muddy, evidence of the storm that had passed through. Neighbors were beginning to emerge, checking on their own homes and helping each other with small repairs or clearing debris. She greeted familiar faces with a smile and a nod, noting the collective effort to restore normalcy after the night's chaos. Life had a way of continuing, no matter the challenges faced the night before. As she walked through the neighborhood, she couldn't help but think about the contrast between the storm's destruction and the human kindness she had witnessed and offered. The stranger had been lost, wet, and frightened, and she had done what she could to provide comfort. It was a reminder that even small gestures could have profound impacts. She felt a quiet pride in knowing that her compassion had mattered. Even in the briefest of encounters, her day continued with its usual tasks: running errands, helping neighbors, and performing chores around her home. Yet there was a new sense of lightness in her heart. The storm had been a test of her resilience and kindness, and she had passed it without hesitation. It reinforced her belief that life's hardships did not define a person's character. Rather, it was the choices made in moments of challenge that truly mattered. She carried this lesson with her, letting it shape her interactions and decisions throughout the day. In the afternoon, she visited the market to buy a few necessary items. The streets were still damp, and the air carried the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil. Vendors were arranging their goods, chatting with neighbors, and attempting to return to normal routines. She exchanged greetings, purchased a few vegetables, and noticed how the community was slowly recovering. Even in hardship, people found ways to support each other, and it reminded her of the value of solidarity and care as she walked back home. She noticed small signs of the storm's aftermath: a broken branch here, a puddle there, and a few damaged roofs. It was a reminder that nature's fury could disrupt life, but human resilience and kindness could restore balance. She thought about the stranger again, hoping that he had found shelter and warmth elsewhere, and she felt a quiet reassurance knowing that her small act of help might have been the difference between despair and hope for him. When she returned home, she settled into her usual routine. She washed the vegetables, prepared a simple meal, and ate quietly, reflecting on the events of the previous night. The storm had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, but it had also revealed something important: that kindness could shine brightest in moments of adversity, even when she had almost nothing. She had given freely, without expectation, and it had created a moment of connection that transcended words. As evening approached, she continued her chores, repairing small things around the house and tidying her living space. The streets outside were calm, the air fresh, and the world seemed to have returned to its usual rhythm. Yet she knew that life was unpredictable, and the memory of the stranger lingered in her mind. She wondered if their paths would ever cross again, or if this encounter would remain a brief but meaningful chapter in both of their lives. Night fell, and she prepared for rest, the day's activities leaving her weary but content. She reflected on the idea that life was full of unexpected moments, some challenging, some beautiful, and some that changed everything without warning. The stranger had appeared during a storm seeking shelter, and she had provided it without hesitation. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were often invisible but deeply significant. Before closing her eyes, she looked out the window at the quiet streets. The rain now gone, and the moonlight casting a gentle glow on the surroundings. She thought about how unpredictable life could be and how important it was to remain open-hearted, compassionate, and ready to act when someone needed help. She knew that the world would continue to present challenges, but she also knew that kindness was a choice she could make every day. Regardless of her circumstances, in the stillness of the night, she felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. The memory of the stranger, the storm, and the act of helping someone in need stayed with her. A quiet reminder that life's greatest moments often came from selfless actions. She drifted to sleep with a heart full of hope and a mind contemplating the endless possibilities that tomorrow might bring. Little did she know, the next day would bring a surprise far beyond anything she had imagined, a moment that would change her life in ways she could never have expected. Proving that kindness has a way of returning to those who give it freely. The day started like any other, with soft sunlight filtering through the cracks in her shutters and the gentle sounds of birds returning after the storm. She had just finished her morning chores and was about to step outside, and she noticed an unusual sound on the street, a low hum that grew louder with every passing second. Curious, she walked to the small window facing the street. Her eyes widened in disbelief. A line of sleek, expensive cars stretched as far as she could see, gleaming under the morning sun, their polished surfaces reflecting the world around them. She blinked, thinking her eyes must be playing tricks. But the scene remained. Her heart pounded as she stepped outside, cautious but drawn by a mixture of curiosity and unease. Neighbors began to gather as well, drawn by the unusual sight. Some whispered to each other, pointing, while others stared in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The sound of engines and the shine of luxury vehicles created an atmosphere that was almost surreal. For someone like her, who had lived her life with very little, this display was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. As she moved closer to the street, a few men in formal attire stepped out of the cars, walking toward her with purpose and professionalism. She felt a mix of fear and excitement. Who were these people, and why were they here? Her mind raced with questions, yet she remained composed. She had learned in life that panic rarely helped, and moments like these required calm observation and quick thinking. She took a deep breath and prepared herself for whatever was about to happen. One of the men stepped forward and spoke in a polite, respectful tone, asking if she was the person who had helped a stranger during the storm the previous night. She nodded cautiously, unsure how they knew about her actions. He smiled gently and explained that the stranger she had helped was someone very important, someone who had been deeply touched by her kindness. She listened in disbelief, struggling to understand how a simple act of compassion could have drawn such attention. Her neighbors watched silently, sensing the gravity of the situation. The men continued, explaining that the stranger had arranged for them to come and offer assistance. She was shocked, realizing that her quiet act of helping someone in need had somehow led to a moment far beyond her imagination. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the life she had lived with the extraordinary event unfolding before her eyes. She had always believed in kindness, but she never expected it to return in such a dramatic, life-changing way. One of the men handed her a letter, carefully folded and addressed to her. She opened it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the carefully written words. The letter expressed gratitude for her selflessness, explaining that her actions had revealed the true nature of her heart. It detailed the stranger's desire to offer support and resources, not as charity, but as recognition of her humanity, integrity, and courage. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read, the weight of the moment pressing down on her with both awe and disbelief. As she processed the information, more details emerged. The stranger, it turned out, was a successful individual who valued character above wealth. He had been impressed by her willingness to help someone in need despite her own hardships. The letter explained that the luxurious cars, the people who had arrived, and the assistance being offered were all part of an effort to ensure she could live comfortably and safely. honoring the kindness she had shown. She was overwhelmed by the enormity of it all, unable to fully grasp the scale of what was happening. Neighbors approached her cautiously, asking if she was all right, their voices filled with awe and curiosity. She nodded, still processing the scene before her. People had begun taking photos, recording videos, and sharing whispers. But she remained focused on the essence of the moment. It was not about the spectacle, the cars, or the attention. It was about the recognition that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could create profound impacts in ways one might never expect. The men guided her to one of the vehicles, inviting her to take a seat. She hesitated at first, feeling unworthy, but their reassurance and gentle encouragement eased her doubts. As she sat, she noticed the attention to detail, the professionalism, and the care with which everything was handled. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, and yet it felt safe, intentional, and deeply respectful. Every gesture reflected the gratitude and thoughtfulness of the stranger. She had helped during the storm. They drove her through the streets, past familiar landmarks and neighborhoods she knew well, but now seen through the lens of an extraordinary experience. People waved, whispered, and stared in astonishment, recognizing the significance of what was happening. She felt a mixture of humility and wonder, realizing that her life, once ordinary and filled with struggles, had suddenly intersected with something remarkable. The feeling was surreal, and she held on to it tightly, letting it sink in without fully trying to comprehend every detail. The journey led them to a location she had never imagined entering, an environment of elegance, sophistication, and careful attention to detail. She felt out of place at first, but the warm welcome and respectful demeanor of everyone around her eased her anxiety. It was clear that the focus was on her, not the spectacle, and that the purpose of this moment was genuine recognition of her compassion. She felt honored, humbled, and deeply moved, realizing that her simple choice to help a stranger had created an opportunity beyond anything she had ever imagined throughout the day. She was guided, introduced to people, and given the chance to understand the depth of the stranger's gratitude. She learned that he had been touched, not only by her actions, but also by her character, resilience, and humility. His message was clear. True kindness, given freely and without expectation, was rare and invaluable. She was awed by the sincerity and thoughtfulness behind every gesture, realizing that her life was being transformed not by wealth alone, but by recognition of her humanity. Despite the extraordinary events, she remained grounded, her mind returning to the lessons she had learned throughout her life. The importance of compassion, resilience, and empathy were evident now more than ever. She understood that her simple choice to help someone during a storm had triggered a ripple effect, creating opportunities and experiences far beyond what she had ever imagined. The power of kindness, she realized, was limitless, capable of reshaping lives and altering paths in ways that often remained unseen until the moment of revelation. As evening approached, she returned to her neighborhood with a new perspective. The street that had been quiet in the morning was now buzzing with conversations, admiration, and whispers of astonishment. Neighbors came forward to congratulate her, to express their awe, and to share their amazement at the unfolding story. She accepted their words graciously, her heart filled with gratitude for the moment, yet she remained humble, aware that her actions were simply a reflection of her character, not a pursuit of recognition or reward. That night, as she prepared for rest, she reflected on the day's events. The storm had brought not only challenge, but also the labasa, opportunity for a profound encounter that would change her life forever. The arrival of the cars, the people, and the messages of gratitude were all tangible manifestations of the impact her kindness had made. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her small, selfless act had resonated so powerfully. Sleep came slowly that night, her mind filled with thoughts, emotions, and the awareness that life could bring unexpected miracles to those who acted with genuine compassion. The following morning brought a sense of calm and anticipation. The streets were quiet, but her mind was restless, still replaying the extraordinary events of the previous day. She had never imagined that a single act of kindness could create such a ripple in the world around her. Her neighbors, too, were talking in hushed voices about what had happened. But she remained grounded, focusing on the reality of her life and the lessons it had taught her. She knew that wealth and material possessions were not the measure of happiness or worth, and she held firmly to the values she had cultivated over years of struggle and perseverance. As she went about her morning routine, there was a knock at the door. She opened it cautiously, surprised to see the stranger from the storm standing there. This time not drenched and weary, but composed and confident. There was a warmth in his eyes that conveyed gratitude and respect. He smiled gently and invited her to sit down, explaining that he wanted to personally thank her and explain why the events of the previous day had unfolded in such an unexpected way. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Unsure of what to expect but ready to listen, he began by recounting his experiences, explaining that he had traveled extensively and had encountered many people, but few had shown the depth of compassion and selflessness that she had displayed. Her willingness to help without expectation had left a profound impression on him. He described the importance of character, kindness, and integrity in a world that often valued wealth and status over human decency. She listened intently, humbled by his words. Realizing that her small act had been seen and valued far beyond what she could have imagined, he went on to explain the arrangements he had made the previous day. The cars, the people, and the support being offered were all part of his effort to honor her actions. He emphasized that his intention was not to provide charity, but to recognize and reward genuine humanity. The words resonated deeply with her, reinforcing her belief that acts of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to create real change. She was overwhelmed, both emotionally and mentally. Trying to absorb the magnitude of the moment, the stranger then revealed that he wished to ensure her life was comfortable and secure, providing opportunities and resources that she had never experienced before. He detailed plans to assist with her home, her work, and her future, all while allowing her to retain her independence and dignity. She felt a wave of emotion, tears welling in her eyes, as she realized that her life was about to transform in ways she had never dared to imagine. It was not simply about wealth, but about recognition, respect, and the validation of her values and choices. Throughout the conversation, she maintained her humility, expressing gratitude while remaining grounded. She acknowledged that she had acted out of principle and compassion, not in anticipation of reward. The stranger nodded, affirming that it was precisely this selflessness that had prompted his actions. She realized that her life, once constrained by scarcity and struggle, was now intersecting with a world of possibility, opportunity, and hope, all because of a single act of empathy. Neighbors continued to watch with curiosity, but she remained focused on the interaction, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point, the hardships, the small joys, and the consistent choices to act with integrity and compassion. She understood that her life had always been defined by these values, and that the rewards she was now receiving were a natural extension of the character she had cultivated over time. It was a powerful reminder that living with kindness and empathy had lasting effects. Often beyond immediate comprehension, the stranger invited her to accompany him to see the arrangements he had made, including improvements to her home, resources for her work, and other support that would ensure her well-being. She was hesitant at first, feeling unworthy of such generosity, but his reassurance and warmth encouraged her to accept. As she witnessed the thoughtful planning and care, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and awe. The world, she realized, could respond in extraordinary ways to genuine kindness, and her life was a testament to that truth. Throughout the day, she met with people who had been part of the effort, each interaction reinforcing the sincerity of the stranger's intentions. Everyone treated her with respect and dignity, reflecting the values she had demonstrated through her actions. She was introduced to opportunities and resources, not as charity, but as acknowledgement of her character and potential. The experience was surreal, yet deeply affirming, showing her that her life was about to enter a new chapter, filled with possibility and hope. As evening approached, she took a moment to reflect on the journey. The storm had been the catalyst for everything the challenge. the vulnerability, and the opportunity to act with compassion. She understood that her choices, made quietly and selflessly, had set in motion events that would change her life forever. The realization filled her with humility and gratitude, reminding her that true kindness never goes unnoticed, even if the recognition comes in unexpected ways. The stranger offered final words of encouragement, emphasizing the importance of continuing to live with integrity, compassion, and empathy. He reminded her that her actions had inspired not only him, but also others who had witnessed or learned of her kindness. She felt a profound sense of responsibility and purpose, understanding that the impact of her choices extended far beyond the immediate moment. Her heart was full, her mind clear, her spirit uplifted by the recognition of the values she had always held dear. That night, as she prepared for rest, she reflected on the extraordinary events that had unfolded. Her life, once defined by struggle and scarcity, had been transformed by a single act of kindness. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that her actions had mattered, that they had created change, and that her values had been affirmed in a tangible and meaningful way. Sleep came easily, her mind calm, and her heart filled with gratitude, hope, and a renewed commitment to living a life defined by compassion and integrity. The following days continued to bring adjustments, opportunities and experiences that she had never anticipated. Yet through it all, she remained grounded, remembering that the essence of the journey was not about wealth or spectacle, but about the simple human choice to act with kindness. She carried the lessons of the storm, the encounter, and the stranger's generosity with her, knowing that life had the power to reward those who lived with empathy, courage, and a selfless heart. Her story became a testament to the transformative power of human kindness, proving that even the smallest gestures could change lives, create opportunities, and inspire hope in ways that were profound, lasting, and truly extraordinary. The days after the stranger's generous gesture were filled with a whirlwind of change, yet she moved through them with the calm, steady heart that had always defined her. Life now seemed to carry a new rhythm. Opportunities she had never imagined were presented to her, but she approached them with humility, careful not to let sudden changes cloud her values or judgment. She continued her daily routines, attending to her home, helping neighbors, and performing small tasks. But each day now carried a sense of hope, of possibility, and of quiet purpose. She began by taking small steps to improve her surroundings. With the resources offered, she repaired her home, making it safer and more comfortable. She organized her belongings, arranged her space thoughtfully, and added small touches that brought warmth and brightness to every corner. It was more than just physical improvement. It was a reflection of her mind and spirit, a manifestation of the care and attention she had always carried in her heart. Each improvement reminded her that life could be better, not just materially, but emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Word of her story began spreading quietly. Neighbors shared what had happened, and the community began treating her with a mixture of respect, admiration, and curiosity. Yet she remained grounded. She accepted their recognition gracefully, never allowing it to define her or overshadow the humility that had always guided her. She knew that her worth was not in the acknowledgement of others, but in the actions she had taken and the principles she had lived by. This awareness kept her centered even as attention and opportunities increased around her. With her home improved and her surroundings more secure, she turned her attention to her personal growth and ambitions. She began learning new skills, exploring avenues that had previously been out of reach, and seeking ways to contribute meaningfully to her community. She discovered that even when life presents extraordinary opportunities, it is the choices one makes and the effort one invests that truly shape outcomes. Her determination, focus, and dedication became evident to those around her, further inspiring admiration and respect. Yet she never let it lead to arrogance or entitlement, despite the remarkable changes. She maintained her connections to her past. She continued helping neighbors, assisting those in need, and performing small acts of kindness whenever possible. Each act, no matter how small, was a reminder of the values that had guided her through hardship. Even when her own life had improved dramatically, she remained attentive to the struggles and needs of others. She understood that empathy and compassion were not limited by circumstances. They were principles to be practiced consistently, regardless of wealth or status. One morning, as she walked through her neighborhood, she noticed a young child struggling to carry groceries from the market. Without hesitation, she approached and helped the child, carrying the bags and ensuring they reached the home safely. The child's parents expressed gratitude, and she offered gentle advice about kindness, safety, and consideration for others. Moments like these reinforced the lessons she had learned and shared, proving that true impact comes not just from grand gestures, but from consistent, everyday choices that uplift others. As weeks passed, she began collaborating with others who were inspired by her story. Together, they initiated small projects in the neighborhood community gardens, educational support for children, and aid for families struggling to make ends meet. She took a leadership role not out of desire for recognition, but to ensure that the efforts were thoughtful, organized, and genuinely beneficial. She discovered that leadership, rooted in humility and service, is more effective and meaningful than any command driven by ego or ambition. Her influence grew, yet it remained grounded in the core values that had defined her life from the beginning, even as her life became increasingly enriched with resources, recognition, and opportunities. She retained the quiet moments that had always brought her joy. Early mornings spent watching the sunrise, evenings walking through calm streets, and moments of reflection by her window remained sacred. They reminded her of the journey she had undertaken, the storms endured, the hardships faced, and the choices made that ultimately led to transformation. She understood that the external changes were only significant when aligned with inner growth and character. Unexpectedly, the stranger returned one afternoon. He had come to check on her, to see how she was adapting to the changes, and to share thoughts about further opportunities for her personal growth and community impact. Their conversation was warm, respectful, and inspiring. He shared stories of his travels, of people he had met, and of values he cherished. She listened intently, appreciating the insights while remaining humble. The exchange reinforced her belief that learning, empathy, and connection were lifelong endeavors, no matter one's circumstances or achievements. During this time, she also began mentoring younger individuals in her community. She shared her experiences, teaching them the importance of compassion, resilience, and selfless action. She emphasized that wealth or status should never dictate the ability to help others. Even the simplest gestures could create profound impact. The young people admired her wisdom, drawn to the authenticity, humility, and warmth she exuded. She realized that her journey had not only transformed her own life, but was now influencing the lives of many others in meaningful ways. Throughout all these developments, she remained mindful of balance. She recognized that change, while exciting, could bring new pressures, responsibilities, and distractions. By grounding herself in her values, continuing her daily routines, and maintaining a humble perspective, she navigated each challenge with grace. She understood that true fulfillment comes not from material abundance, but from the alignment of action, principle, and purpose. Months passed, and the neighborhood began to flourish under the combined efforts of her guidance, the community's participation, and the inspiration drawn from her story. Streets became cleaner, gardens thrived, and children enjoyed better educational support. Families facing difficulties received assistance and encouragement. The sense of community strengthened, creating an environment where empathy, cooperation, and mutual support were valued and practiced consistently. She watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. Recognizing that her journey had come full circle, her actions had sparked change, and she now had the opportunity to nurture and sustain it. Even with her growing influence and access to resources, she maintained simplicity in her lifestyle. She dressed modestly, engaged in everyday tasks, and continued to help wherever needed. Her humility remained a hallmark of her character, earning respect from those around her. She understood that influence and resources are tools to create positive impact, not symbols of superiority. This perspective kept her grounded, ensuring that her journey remained authentic and meaningful. and in alignment with the principles that had guided her life all along. As the sun set on another day, she reflected on her remarkable journey from enduring hardships and facing storms to helping a stranger and experiencing a life-altering transformation. She felt gratitude, humility, and a sense of purpose. She understood that her story was not only about receiving, but about the continuous practice of kindness, empathy, and thoughtful action. Each day offered new opportunities to make a difference, to inspire others, and to live a life grounded in compassion and integrity. That night, as she prepared for rest, she looked out at the quiet streets of her neighborhood. She saw children playing, neighbors chatting, and families thriving. She smiled, recognizing that her life had been forever changed, yet she had remained true to herself. The stranger's influence had been significant, but the essence of her journey, her courage, kindness, and selflessness, had been the true catalyst for transformation. She drifted into sleep with a heart full of hope, a mind focused on purpose, and a spirit committed to living a life defined by empathy, compassion, and the enduring power of human kindness.